Hello, everybody. Welcome to our slide presentation about the main kinds of errors that we experience in our classroom, as well as a few strategies about when to do error correction based on those errors. So there are really three kinds of errors when we talk about types of errors. There are pre-systematic, systematic, and post-systematic errors. We're going to start out here talking about pre-systematic errors. These are errors that are caused before one has learned the rules of a grammar point, learned the definition of a word, or even learned really the pronunciation of a word. These would be random guesses that are incorrect. So, for example, a teacher might show a beginning student a picture of a watermelon, ask them if they know the word. A student raises her hand and says apple. Okay, that's a pre-systematic error because they've never been taught the word watermelon before. They don't know the word, and so they're taking a guess using a word that they do know. Similarly, if a teacher asks students to tell a story about their childhood, and the student uses all simple present verbs, and they have not been taught the past simple yet, then that would also be a kind of pre-systematic error. There are errors, again, that students really, they haven't learned the material yet, and so they don't have a system in place to know or understand that material. So systematic errors would then be pretty clear to understand that there are errors that happen after one has learned the correct rules, the definitions, but perhaps those rules haven't been fully integrated into their mind yet or fully learned yet. You know, they still may have questions, they still may not quite understand everything, they're testing it out, but they do at least know the system. They know what is correct, what the rules are, and whatnot. So, some examples here. If a student has just learned what Quasvo is, and they are asked to put jumbled words into order, and then they put the words into the wrong order. So maybe they're still swapping the auxiliary verb with the subject or something like that. Similarly, maybe a student has learned the past continuous in a prior lesson, and then the student is asked to give a sentence using the past continuous, and then they say, while I was sawing my cousin, I asked her for some money. So they are maybe incorrectly applying the rule. They kind of get that the rule is there, they know that's verb with ing, but they're using the past tense there instead of the base form of the verb. So that would be systematic errors. And then post-systematic errors, these are just those kind of random errors that happen. One already knows the rules, they should probably already have it relatively well mastered, but it's kind of, you know, the student is tired, they just have a random slip of the tongue, they're distracted, they're thinking about something else, and so that would be what's called a post-systematic error. This could be a student is talking and suddenly they can't remember a word, they give the wrong word, then they pause, they think for a second, and then they say the correct word. Or it could be the student comes into your classroom and they're clearly very tired. That student keeps making errors with verb tenses that they have normally mastered, and you know that they know it. It's just they're really clearly just tired and not locked in maybe at the moment. Or it could be something like a student says talked instead of talked when using the past simple, and then they quickly correct themselves and continue to use the past tense pronunciation correctly and consistently. So that would be those would be some examples of post-systematic errors. So when should we error correct? Well, every activity we should error correct. But we really want to focus more on systematic errors in our classroom. So when they have learned something, we want to focus on those errors that they have already learned. That doesn't mean that we never should correct pre-systematic or post-systematic errors. They can be pointed out and corrected, but it's going to be more for awareness um, rather than to really teach. It'll kind of just be something that might get their attention if it's a pre-systematic error where they are now able to kind of notice that error in the future, or notice the grammar in the future, because oh yeah, my teacher corrected me on that before. Oh, now I see what the, why it's correct, or why this other version is correct. Whereas post-systematic error, it's more just kind of like, oh yeah, you're tired. Come on, you know this word. This is the word, and can help them out a little bit. So, but really focus on the systematic errors in our classrooms. There are some other types of errors. These are probably the types of errors that you're thinking about when you think about types of errors. And there are lexical errors, those are vocabulary errors. Syntax, which would be grammar. Phonological errors, which is pronunciation. And interpretive errors, listening or reading, where they're misunderstanding something in those contexts. And then finally, there is something known as a pragmatic error. This is similar to lexical errors, but it's an error in understanding the correct context and maybe what something means in that context. So a common thing would be with idioms, for example. An example might be someone is warm and they say, hey, could you please crack the window? And then the listener walks over to the window and literally breaks it and puts a crack in it. That would be an example of a pragmatic error, where they understand the literal words, but they don't understand what, in that context, that those words have a different kind of meaning. So that would be a pragmatic error. And those are types of errors to listen for when you are error correcting. And really try to focus on all of them. Lastly, just remember, keep error correcting, get the error correcting, I say here. It's really important to make sure that we are doing error correcting in all of our activities and all of our classes, and giving students feedback in these errors. So focus on those systematic errors and focus on those different kinds of errors, please.